Okay, so I want to go around sort of rapidly to everybody here, and I'll start with you, Rosa. I was talking this morning at the place I always eat, which you make fun of me for eating there, but with somebody who's like a big foreign policy macher, and we were saying, well, what's the country that poses the biggest threat to U.S. interests in the Middle East? And we tried to go through the list. What do you think the country we landed on was?
Israel. I'm going to go with Israel, David.
I think that is the correct answer. And so the question, as we're looking at the region, is what where our interests could get set back. What could be the next shoe to drop in all of this? And I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
I have no idea which is going to be the next shoe to drop. I think Mark just outlined some of the reasons to be worried about Iranian financed shoes that might drop. But given the ongoing conflict in Gaza, given the conflict in the West Bank, there are all kinds of shoes that could drop all over that region. And I think Israel itself, domestically speaking, is not particularly stable at the moment. Netanyahu remains deeply unpopular. The nation remains deeply, deeply divided. The Saudis, the UAE, the nations that Israel and the United States have been counting on to develop partnerships with Israel that would stabilize the region are now kind of going, what do we do? We sort of wanted this, but now our own publics would be deeply intolerant, and they're terrified of a wider conflict that breaks out, that sucks them all in. I mean, I think Israel has had the policies of the current Israeli government have had a profoundly destabilizing influence in the region, and I have absolutely no idea how that's going to come out. As ever, I admire the happy Donald Trump, who has told us now that world peace is breaking out all over, starting in the Middle East, and that's awesome. But it sure doesn't really look that way to me. Um, although I'd love to be proven wrong.
Yeah, it doesn't look that way to me either. And I had a column yesterday at the Daily Beast saying that Trump's thinking he deserves a Nobel Peace Prize is yet another sign of his mental illness, at which I tried to back up with more than just that assertion. Doug, I want to ask you a question because of your vast expertise and an element of this whole thing that I don't get. And that is, and it overlaps between NATO and this whole thing. Iran is an absolutely crucial ally to the Russians. The Iranian drone production is important. When Zelensky, met with Trump, he said, "I hope you're going to blow up the Shahed drone factories." Um, and we know that Trump talked to Putin 2 days before this bombing. And I'm just wondering, what do you think Vladimir Putin thinks of all of this? And what do you think Vladimir Putin wants the U.S. to be doing right now?
Well, I think, first of all, this is a pretty clear case study that the so called alliance structure or partner structure that Russia has fashioned is a one-way street, right? I mean, these countries like Iran and China and so forth are welcome to send things to Russia, but Russia really doesn't have much to send back. The second point I'd make is that the Russian arms industry has taken a catastrophic marketing blow because the air defense systems provided by Russia that Iran has depended on for 20 or 30 years have fundamentally been destroyed and they failed. So Russia's not in good shape in that regard. And then I think Putin's got to be looking at this whole, the whole Trump episode as just another case study that the American president is, if anything, self-centered, disruptive, and unpredictable, and not, frankly, a serious player on the international scene. And I think that gives Putin a sense of confidence that he can do what he wants to in Ukraine. And, it may take the European defense industry about a decade to be able to produce sufficient self-defense capability and fill the gap for Ukrainian defense capability. But he can kind of count on Trump being Trump.
Uh, Kori, what do you think? NATO coming out of this summit, the NATO member countries. Do you think they're like feeling better about the world today? They've handled Trump, and now they can get back to their business, or do you think they're seeing, Putin making gains in Ukraine and new risks approaching on the horizon?
So I think they are heaving a huge sigh of relief that they got through this summit without Trump repudiating Article 5 or explicitly demanding the removal of all US troops from Europe. I think that's what allies were most afraid of the United States doing. I don't actually agree that the Russians are making progress in Ukraine. I think, three, 3.5, 3 1/3 years at war, and they're in possession of 19% of Ukraine and not making much progress. I think the great good news of the strike on Iran is that as Doug suggested, the only thing that this axis of evil produced was thoughts and prayers for the Iranian leadership, right? Like nobody rushed into the void. Nobody started threatening the United States or Israel. It looks like, I'm not sure, maybe Mark can speak to the validity of a posting on social media that the Chinese government were warning the Iranians not to close the Straits of Hormuz. But at a minimum, they have not gotten help. Iran hasn't gotten help from the countries it's trying to join the club of. And I think that has to be reassuring to Europeans, because Russia by itself is a plenty big enough problem. And as Doug says, it will be a decade before Europeans can actually feel confident about their ability to defend their territories and their peoples without American involvement. So I think overwhelmingly, David, it's relief.
Okay. By the way, you said there was no Russian offers of support. That's generally true, of course. That's if you're ruling out people who are drinking a lot of antifreeze, and so which if where and by that I'm making reference to Dmitry Medvedev, who says insane things, all the time. Let me ask you a question, Mark. I mean, again, we're sort of doing lightning round here, but I think about all of this, and I have two conflicting thoughts in my head about Iran. One, the Israelis are extremely worried about Iran getting a nuclear weapon, which doesn't pose an existential threat to us. It does to them. But Iran's been a thorn in their side without a nuclear weapon for the past 50 years. So, not ending the nuclear program doesn't end the Iran problem for them. On the other hand, ending Hezbollah and Hamas and pushing back on the Houthis and getting rid of Assad, that does make them a lot weaker. And I just wonder, is Iran the threat it used to be? Or do we have to, this is not, part of the U.S. axis of evil. This is a diminished country, isn't it?
So the kind of the geostrategic picture in the Middle East has radically changed. First of all, and I think someone mentioned it today, I think this is, of course, one of the reasons why the Israelis went in, because that aircraft carrier that was sitting on their border, which was Hezbollah, was absolutely decimated. Hamas, regardless of kind of the quagmire that's developed, Hamas has been beaten pretty severely. And don't forget that Iranian air defense was hit pretty hard several months ago as well. And so ultimately, Iran is nothing close to what the threat was before. And so I think that the way we look at Iran is quite different. That goes back to kind of the notion of us perhaps some flawed analysis. We thought the Russians were 10 feet tall, and now we also thought the Iranians had this incredible capability. And it turns out the Israelis, through rather brilliant long-term preparatory work in the intelligence and military intelligence field, what they did to this decapitation of the Iranian military and intelligence leadership, as well as doing really incredible damage, where I think the leak rate of the ballistic missiles was at 6-7%. We thought there was going to be thousands of ballistic missiles raining down on Israel. It wasn't. And so Iran is a very different entity right now, and it is certainly severely weakened. There is no doubt about that. And let me just say one other thing too. And emotions shouldn't always come into things. But David, you know me, I'm from New Jersey. I can't help myself. There's few people in the U.S. national security world who are shedding any tears. A lot of the people that the Israelis ended up killing had U.S. blood on their hands. And so, I know that's not a reason to launch a war. So that's not a reason why we should have the B-2 and over Iranian nuclear sites. But at the end of the day, this was a country that did a lot of damage to us. I remember my time in Iraq, and the Iranians had provided these EFPs, explosively formed projectiles, that killed hundreds of U.S. servicemen and women. Embassy bombings, the murder of our station chief, Khobar Towers, assassination plots against U.S. national security leaders. So on the kind of my old school New Jersey way, David, which I know you'll understand, I'm not shedding any tears for the Iranians taking a bit of a beating now. But I think that it is worth taking a look back now as U.S. national security planners, and the Israelis too, perhaps, look at the region. Iran is nothing, not nearly the threat that it was only several weeks ago.
But David, if Iran is the Iran that Mark just assessed, is that an Iran that gives up its nuclear ambitions or races to a capability? And I think the weakness of Iran actually pushes us towards the potential they accelerate the program.
Yeah, and all the discussions we've had here on different groups of experts in the past couple weeks on this, that's always the conclusion. That Iran wouldn't have been attacked if they had a nuclear weapon. And that we know from the North Korea case and the Libya case and the Ukraine case, all the sides of this thing. And so, if you were running Iran, you might think now's the time. Last question, Rosa, fairly quickly, but I think one thing that is finally being misinterpreted here is that Trump's trying to make this look like a big show of strength. But I am getting from his vibes, his body language, his 12-day war, this is over, one and done, that it's not that. I'm getting that there's so much pushback to getting involved in a long-term war in the Middle East from within MAGA that Trump's kind of shot his load. Kori's one shot at the OK Corral. That's okay with MAGA. I don't think there is support for him doing anything else, and I think he knows it. And I'm just wondering if you agree.
I think that's right, David. And in fact, Trump's body language and words actually seem a little panicky. He desperately does not want anyone to say, "Oh no, you're not done, Donald. You need to keep going. You need to send ground troops. My goodness," or you need to do more strikes. He does not want that. I don't think we should overestimate the sophistication of Trump's grasp of the geopolitical situation here, but he's not someone who we know from experience, we know from his first term, we know from everything he's ever said, and I think it does make sense to take him both literally and seriously. He doesn't want to get involved in a war. He likes the idea of being a winner. Here he thought that there was this sort of quick and easy thing he could do that would piggyback on what Israel was always doing, that would make him look good and would let him declare victory. And that's what he did. But he has absolutely no appetite for anything more to start with. There was immediate blowback to the strikes already from within his own constituency, within his own base. And now he is very anxious to be able to say, we're totally done and it was great and we're winners and it was a big victory. And thus his sort of panicky response to anyone saying anything that would contradict that. And again, in all things being equal, I'm okay with that. Right. I cannot see any further follow-up military action undertaken by this particular administration being anything but bad news for the United States and the world. So let's let him stay where he is in his slightly anxious, happy place.